Esther Stark, a remarkable individual who has undergone an extraordinary transformation from a life of chronic shyness and fear to a multi-talented author, artist, singer, and speaker. Through her book and on the stage, Esther shares her powerful story and encourages others to step beyond their comfort zone, face their fears, and begin living a life of purpose and joy. In her spare time, you'll find Esther belting out a song on the karaoke stage. I know you're going to love her. Welcome to the stage, Esther.
Thank you very much. I really feel honored to be here speaking with you this evening. And even more than being honored, I feel like I'm one of the fortunate ones because I haven't had to travel that same medical road that many of you have. And though I haven't traveled it, my husband Sean has. When Amber called me a couple of weeks ago and asked if I'd be able to speak this evening, my first thought was maybe Sean would be the better choice to speak because he is a cancer survivor. But then she went on to tell me that I had 15 to 20 minutes to share with you my journey of overcoming chronic fears in my life. Well, I knew right then Sean would not cut the braid because he can't even clear his throat in 20 minutes time. Sean, my husband, is a survivor of vesicular cancer. He likes to joke that his friends always called him El Cajon. But other than cancer survivor, he has also survived a small plane crash. He survived a near-death experience with sepsis and numerous other close-to-death experiences. And because he has had a number of those kind of experiences, he seems to think he's immortal these days. He always tells me that he is going to outlive me, in spite of the fact that I've always been the healthy one. I tell him that he's wrong, he won't outlive me, because if I go first, I'm taking him with me. That man would not know what to do, how to do it, if I wasn't here to tell him. And heaven forbid he'd never be able to find the parking space in the shopping center. So fortunately, I have a good communication, and Sean and I have a great relationship, so I can tease him that way. But he often likes to say that I have way too much fun at his expense. But you know, I just can't resist because he gives me so much material to work with. So. And I could never tease him the way that I do if we didn't have that close relationship. You know, it was only about 33 years ago when I lived in what I call a wishful world. I wished I could join in. I wished I was like them. I wished for once I could voice my own opinion, but I couldn't. You see, I lived in the shadows of a small three-letter word, S-H-Y. You know, that word shy is a small word, but it's powerful enough to control a person's entire life. It certainly did mine. And in case some of you may be shy too, but that word shy, really what it all boils down to, you know, a lot of people say, well, I'm shy, but the real meaning of being shy is fear. I feared everything. I feared failure. I feared rejection. And of course, I feared being humiliated if I made a wrong choice. So do you know what fear really is? There's an acronym that really describes it. F-E-A-R is false evidence appearing real. And so often when we have fear, that's what it is. It's all that false evidence that we're thinking of there. By my teenage years, I'd had a lot of false evidence stored up here in this little brain of mine. Oh, you're not good enough, Esther. You're just a redneck country girl. When I was in junior high, I wanted to be a cheerleader. And I bet a lot of you gals wanted to be cheerleaders, or maybe you were, right? So I memorized those cheers. I threw those pom-poms in the air and I yelled, "Go Tigers!" And then that day came. The booming voice came across the intercom at school, and the names of the cheerleaders were read off. My name wasn't called. I kind of slumped down in my desk, and I pouted. But you know, off and on through that school year, I wondered, would I have won if I'd had the courage to try out? But I didn't. And then high school came along, and I thought, I'm going to kick this shy personality of mine. I'm going to be outgoing. I'm going to start hanging out with friends, and I'll go to the games. I'm not going to be shy anymore. So that summer, before school started, I got my hair, it was a little darker shade of brunette, and yeah, it used to be brunette. And I tweezed all those little eyebrow hairs out of there so I didn't have a little unibrow up there. And by the time September came along, I was ready. I was ready for high school. That first week of school was freshman initiation and class officer elections. Well, I heard a little voice say, I nominate Esther Nelson for class treasurer. And before I could even blink an eye, an involuntary muscle shot my arm up in the air and I yelled, I decline, I decline. I was so embarrassed. Just like in junior high, I slid down at my desk. I didn't want to make eye contact with anybody. And so I just feared that feeling of, what if nobody votes for me? I'd be so embarrassed if nobody voted for me. But you know, by the time I had reached high school, I really, like I said, I really built up a lot of that false evidence in my brain. And I can remember as I had started school, I shared with my mother that my goal in life was to someday be a nurse. I really wanted to be a nurse. And I remember what she said. She says, Esther, don't set your goals so high that you're disappointed when you don't reach them. Well, I know my mother's words were meant to protect me, but I translated that as, you're just a redneck country girl, Esther, and you're never going to accomplish your goals. I quickly learned never to set goals. If I set a goal, I might fail, right? You know, I once read a quote in a Reader's Digest magazine that stuck with me because it described my life. And it said, when opportunity knocked at my door, by the time I unlatched the chain, turned back the bolt, and opened the door, it was gone. I missed so many opportunities in my life simply because I declined to open that door. Or I took too long to open it because of what I feared might be on the other side, the unknown. When I got married about 21 years old, I married the opposites attract. My husband was outgoing, he was outspoken, he was the decision maker. All I had to do was follow his lead. But the thing is, that doesn't always work for long. About 11 years into our marriage, He had an auto accident. He was thrown through the windshield of his pickup truck and it broke his neck. He spent the last 10 years of his life in a wheelchair trying to be a productive citizen, but eventually depression won the battle. You know, his suicide thrust me into a world that I wasn't ready for. I had to start making decisions on my own. I was thankful that I had 4 teenage sons at that time, but I still floundered for several years thereafter. I floundered with guilt, grief, heartbreak, and even depression of my own. I had an aha moment one night. During that time frame, I was in my typical position for me at that time, kneeling next to my bed, crying and sobbing, crying out to Jesus to lift me out of my pit of despair and set my feet on a hard, firm ground, much like David did in the Bible. But as I was on my knees, I had this thought, and I don't have time to go into the story with you tonight as what happened that night. But that evening, I knew I had to make a change. I didn't have somebody that I really shared with that I was going to try to get past those fears, so I had to start learning on my own. I bought self-help books, and I tried to apply some of the techniques. And I did read, at that time, I read a book called Blue Like Jazz. The author was Donald Miller. And as I was trying to make those changes in my life, his quote really kind of spoke to me. He says, "You can't expect to change the Congo until you figure out what's wrong with the person in the mirror." Well, I knew what was wrong with her. I just didn't know how to fix her. So I secretly became determined and disciplined. I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing in case I failed, but I started to take one small step at a time, outside of my comfort zone, beyond my fears. And the first time I was really faced with a major decision that was really fearful for me, I looked at my comfort zone and I kind of put a toe outside there, testing the waters. And that water rippled a little bit, but I saw my comfort zone stretch. So I was encouraged. The next time I had to make a major decision, I got a little more courageous and I put a foot outside that comfort zone. And I saw it stretch a little more. So I had the courage to put a leg out. And each time I faced those fears and I stepped beyond my comfort zone, I saw that comfort zone growing and growing and growing. And you know, when I saw that, do you know what else I saw? That fear zone was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And do you know how that made me feel? For once in my life, I felt free. Free of those fears that held me in the shadows of that small little comfort zone. And you know, usually fears show up when we're faced with the unknown, when we don't know what the outcome's going to be, we don't have answers, we imagine the worst. And if you here tonight have had a cancer diagnosis, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. Am I right? You know, I began trying to face my fears, and I changed that meaning of false evidence appearing real. And I started trying to look at my fear as FEAR. Face everything and rise. Once I started doing that, all I had up there in my brain were beginning to be erased. I was able to hush those voices that told me, you can't do that, Esther. You're not good enough. I began to say yes to opportunities instead of no. I learned to socialize, and my house became the hub of our Singles Christians group game nights. And did you know that courage is not a personality trait? I always thought it was, but I realized it's a skill set to be practiced. I learned not to compare myself to others. God made each one of us different, and we have our own special gifts. I also learned mistakes are lessons. They're not a life sentence. And by experience, I really learned that quitting, I realized, gets me absolutely nowhere. And after 40 years of not making goals in my life, being afraid to set goals, I decided that my life's challenge from then on would be to start setting new goals and start reaching for those. And when I did that, I learned what contentment in life meant. And you know, to be content doesn't mean we don't desire more. It means you're thankful for what you have and you're patient for what's to come. The funny thing is once I became content, and I was happy right where I was in my life, something big happened. I met the love of my life. He's not perfect, but he's perfect for me. Thank you. We dated for a year, and we got married in our 60s. Now that shows you it is never too late to make a change in your life. Well, when we got married, I retired and I moved to a small island in the Puget Sound where he was. And it was in my retirement years that I became an accomplished artist. I sold hundreds of paintings. I began to teach paint and sip classes. And my new husband, being the karaoke buff that he is, he got me to start singing in public. 3 years ago, we moved to Yuma, and in our 70s, we started a family-oriented karaoke business. Can you believe the shy little coward of a girl, of me, could stand up and sing in front of a large group of people at a karaoke event? And now, here I am in front of all of you, hoping to inspire you that it's never too late. It's never too late to take those first steps of faith outside whatever your fears may be. You know, your fears may have nothing to do with being shy. Maybe they have something to do with trust. Or maybe it's talking in front of people. Maybe your fear is of the unknown. Will there be side effects of the treatment? Will the cancer come back? Whatever your fear may be, please don't let it stop you from living your best life ever. Now, I'm living proof that you can rise above your fears. And that statement applies to all of us. And do you know what that first step is to rise above your fears? It's believing in yourself. I'd like to see you start rising above your fears. Revisit any dreams that you may have let go die. And start setting new goals in your life. You know, all of us in this room tonight have been touched by cancer in some way, if not yourself, and a family member, a neighbor, a friend. I have 4 sons, and my oldest son has spent years in cancer research. And so I asked him to describe to me his experience in the cancer research in just a few sentences. And so this is what he said. He says, "Mom, I've devoted 25 years to curing cancer. Unfortunately, it won't be cured in my lifetime. But I stood on strong shoulders to improve the quality of life for cancer patients. And I hope that the next generation can stand on mine." And as I said before, my husband is a cancer survivor. So I asked him what he thought one of the most important lessons he learned while he was on his cancer journey. And this is what he told me. He says, "Cancer terrifies people. They always imagine it with a capital C, and they're inclined to assume the worst. So when I hear of someone newly diagnosed, I reached out to them. I had realized by traveling my own cancer journey, I was in a position to hold up the lantern and guide others as they began their cancer journey." Sean became a self-anointed cancer buddy. He'd share his lessons. He'd go with them to their chemo or radiation sessions. He'd find aspects of their journey that they could both laugh at. And he made some of the best friends of his life. Nearly 10 years ago at our wedding, our minister was one of his cancer buddies. His best friend, or his best man in the wedding, was another. And our guest book was signed by the grandson of our dear friend and neighbor. He wrote his name, Colin. Then after his name, he wrote, "Your cancer buddy." This little guy was 10 years old. He was a cancer survivor. He was diagnosed with leukemia at age 2. He's now about 20 years old. If Sean were up here talking to you instead of me, assuming he cleared his throat by now, he would tell you, you have been on the cancer journey, and that gives you a responsibility to hold up that lantern and shine a light to guide others who are just beginning their journey. I didn't have time to go into all the stories that I would absolutely love to tell you this evening, but you can read about them in this book. The name of the book, You Were Shy, came about because when I talk about my shy days now, people always respond with, "You were shy?" I was painfully shy. So I published my book last fall as an encouragement to others that they can rise above their fears. Don't let those fears control you. Sean will be at the back table after dinner tonight. If you would like to purchase a book, he'll take cash, check, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle. And the book is also available on Amazon. So in closing though tonight, I want to quote a very popular phrase. And it says, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step." So tonight I want to encourage you to take that first step of faith and start walking.